The heater in the rental car had died an hour ago, turning the sleek sedan into a coffin of glass and steel. Sophia couldn't feel her fingers anymore. The Wyoming wind wasn't just blowing, it was screaming, piling snow against the windows, burying her alive in the middle of nowhere. She closed her heavy eyelids, the darkness tempting her to sleep, to just let go. But then a sound cut through the gale, not the wind. A heavy, rhythmic thudding. A shadow fell over the windshield. She forced her eyes open and saw him, a dark figure on a massive horse, looming like a spirit carved from the mountain itself. The silence of the Wyoming wilderness is not empty. It is heavy. It is a weight that presses down on the sagebrush and the ancient rocks, a silence so profound that it can ring in your ears louder than the sirens of any city. For Sophia, that silence had become a terrifying roar. The GPS on her dashboard had been flashing a red, searching for signal for the last 40 miles, a digital heartbeat that had finally flatlined. She was an architect. Her life was built on straight lines, calculated loads, and predictable outcomes. If you put a steel beam here, it holds the weight. If you pour the concrete at this temperature, it cures correctly. But there was no blueprint for this. There was no schematic for a sudden whiteout blizzard in the Teton County backcountry when you were dressed in a cashmere coat and Italian leather boots. The rental car, a vehicle designed for highway commuting and not for 2 feet of fresh powder, sat at a jagged angle in a ditch. She had slid off the road, if you could even call it a road any more than 20 minutes ago. The engine had sputtered and died, and with it the heat. Now the cold was invading. It didn't rush in, it seeped, came through the floorboards and the glass. A creeping numbness that started in her toes and was slowly working its way up her legs. Sophia gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, though she couldn't feel the leather anymore. Outside, the world had been erased. There was no sky, no ground, only a swirling vortex of white violence. She checked her phone for the 100th time. It's no service. No. Just a black mirror reflecting her own terrified blue eyes. She thought about her meeting in Jackson Hole tomorrow, the presentation that was supposed to make her partner at the firm. It seemed so small now, so ridiculous. The wind howled, shaking the frame of the car. It sounded like a living thing, hungry and angry. Sophia let her head drop against the steering wheel. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and brief, before freezing on her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, though she didn't know who she was asking. The cold was making her sleepy. She knew that was the danger sign. The hypothermia was whispering to her, telling her it was okay to close her eyes, that the sleep would be warm and soft. She drifted. Time lost its meaning. Could have been minutes or hours. Then a thud. A heavy, muffled impact against the driver's side door. Sophia jerked her head up, her vision blurry. Was it a bear? A wolf? Another thud? Then the screech of metal on ice as the door handle was wrenched. The door didn't open. The snow had drifted too high, but then a face appeared at the window. It was obscured by a cowboy hat pulled low and a thick scarf, but the eyes were visible. They were dark, intense, and narrowed against the storm. A gloved fist hammered on the glass. "Unlock it." The voice was muffled but deep, commanding. Sophia fumbled with the lock, her frozen fingers clumsy. She finally hit the button. The man outside braced a boot against the frame and hauled the door open, displacing a cascade of snow onto her lap. The wind rushed in, stealing the last pocket of warmth she had preserving. "Can you walk?" he shouted over the wind. Sophia tried to nod, but her body wouldn't cooperate. She tried to move her legs, but they felt like blocks of wood. The man didn't wait for an answer. He reached in, unbuckling her seatbelt with efficient, rough movements. He was huge, blocking out the storm, smelling of wet wool, pine resin, and horses. "Grab on," he ordered. He pulled her out of the car as if she weighed nothing. The moment her boots hit the deep snow, her knees buckled. He caught her before she fell, sweeping her up into his arms, carried her through the whiteout, trudging with purpose. Through the driving snow, she saw the beast waiting, massive black horse, head bowed against the wind, steam rising from its nostrils. "Hold the horn!" the man yelled, lifting her up into the saddle. The leather was freezing, but the horse beneath it was a radiator of living heat. The man swung up behind her, his chest a solid wall against her back. He reached around her, grabbing the reins with one hand and wrapping his other arm tightly around her waist, pulling her raincoat closed. "Bury your face in my coat," he growled near her ear. "Don't look up until we stop." Sophia did as she was told. She buried her face in the rough canvas of his duster. The horse lunged forward, plowing through the drifts. The world reduced to the rhythm of the horse's gait and the steady, slow beat of the man's heart against her back. She didn't know who he was, but in that vast, freezing emptiness, he was the only thing that was real. The ride was a blur of exhaustion. Sophia faded in and out of consciousness. She remembered the sound of hooves striking wood a bridge, then the creak of a heavy gate. Finally, the wind died down, replaced by the stillness of a structure. "We're here," the man said. His voice was less of a shout now, just a deep rumble. He lifted her down. Her legs were still useless. He kicked open a heavy wooden door, and warmth washed over them, the smell of burning cedar, old leather, and coffee. He carried her inside and kicked the door shut, sealing out the wailing wind. He set her down on a soft, worn leather armchair near a massive stone fireplace. The fire was roaring, casting dancing orange shadows across the room. "Stay," he said. He disappeared into a kitchen area. Sophia looked around. It was a cabin, but not a vacation rental. This was a working home. The walls were unvarnished logs. There were shelves lined with well-read books, bridles hanging on hooks, and a rifle mounted above the mantel. It was masculine, sparse, and incredibly clean. The man returned. He had removed his hat and duster. He was younger than she expected, perhaps in his early 30s. He had dark hair that was slightly too long, falling over his forehead, and a jaw covered in a few days of stubble. He was handsome, but in a severe, sharp-edged way. He looked like the land outside, beautiful but unforgiving. He knelt in front of her and began unlacing her boots. "I can do it," Sophia whispered, her voice cracking. "You can't," he said simply, not looking up. He pulled her boots off, then her soaked socks. He took her frozen feet in his large, rough hands and began to rub them briskly.
"Yeah."
The friction burned, but the feeling began to return, stinging like needles. "My name is Sophia," she managed to say. He didn't stop rubbing her feet. "I'm Wyatt. You're lucky, Sophia. Another hour and you wouldn't have woken up." "Thank you," she said. My GPS said ... Wyatt let out a short, humorless laugh. "GPS doesn't work in the Wind River when a storm rolls off the peaks. You city folks trust screens more than the sky." He stood up, towering over her. "I've got a stew on the stove. You need to eat, then sleep. The road won't be clear for at least 3 days." 3 days? Sophia's eyes widened. "I have a presentation tomorrow. I have to get to Jackson." Wyatt walked to the stove and ladled thick beef stew into a pottery bowl. "You aren't going anywhere. The pass is buried. The lines are down. You're stuck at the double bar, Sophia. Might as well accept it." He handed her the bowl. The steam hit her face, smelling of rosemary and earth. She realized she was starving. As she ate, Wyatt sat in the chair opposite her, nursing a mug of coffee. He watched her with an unreadable expression. He wasn't unfriendly, But he wasn't welcoming either. He was like a rock in a stream present, immovable and indifferent to the water flowing around him. The next 2 days were a lesson in patience that Sophia had never wanted to learn. The storm raged outside, burying the cabin up to the windowsills. Inside, time seemed to stretch and warp. There were no emails to check, no calls to make, no deadlines. There was only the fire, the books, and Wyatt. She watched him. He was a man of constant quiet motion. He didn't rush, but he never stopped. He would brave the storm to feed the horses in the barn, returning covered in snow, his face flushed with cold. He would mend tack by the fire, his large hands surprisingly dexterous as he stitched leather. He chopped wood with a rhythmic, hypnotic cadence that echoed through the cabin. Sophia felt useless. She was a woman who built skyscrapers, who managed million-dollar budgets. Yet here, she didn't know how to keep a fire going or how to make coffee without a machine. On the second afternoon, the snow lightened. Sophia found Wyatt in the kitchen kneading dough for biscuits. "Let me help," she said, "please. I'm going crazy sitting there." Wyatt looked at her, his eyebrows raised. "You ever cook on a cast-iron stove?" "No, but I can learn."
He stepped aside. "All right. Watch the biscuits. Dough, let them burn. The oven has a temperament." They worked in silence for a while. It was an awkward dance at first, navigating the small kitchen. But slowly, a rhythm formed. Sophia set the table. Wyatt fried steaks in a skillet. "So," Wyatt said, breaking the silence as they sat down to eat. "You build things. I design them," Sophia corrected. "Heiresses, corporate headquarters. Glass and steel." "Why?" The question caught her off guard. "Why?" "VCA, USE, because it's leaving a mark. Creating a skyline." "It's progress." Wyatt cut his steak, his eyes on his plate. "Progress," he muttered. "Seems like progress is just covering up the earth with concrete so you don't have to touch the dirt." "That's not fair," Sophia said, feeling a flare of defensiveness. "Cities are full of culture, energy, people connecting." "People connecting." Wyatt looked up, his gaze piercing. "I found you freezing to death in a machine that isolated you from the world, staring at a screen that lied to you. Out here, connection is knowing the wind is changing before it hits. It's knowing your horse trusts you to lead him through a drift. That's real. That's tangible." Sophia fell silent. She wanted to argue, but the memory of his arms around her on the horse, the absolute safety she had felt, stopped her. He was right. In a way, her world was abstract. His was visceral. Later that evening, the storm broke completely. The moon came out, illuminating a landscape that looked like a sea of diamonds. Wyatt stood by the window, looking out. "Come here," he said softly. Sophia walked to his side. The view took her breath away. The mountains were glowing blue and silver under the moonlight. It was terrifyingly beautiful. "This is why I stay," Wyatt said, his voice low. "My family has run the double bar for 4 generations. It's hard life. It's lonely. But look at that." Sophia looked, and for the first time in years, her mind was quiet. She wasn't thinking about the next deadline. She was just ... being. "It's incredible," she whispered. She turned to look at him and found he was already looking at her. The harshness in his eyes had softened. In the firelight, the sharp angles of his face seemed gentler. There was a tension in the air now, different from the storm. It was a magnetic pull. "You don't belong here, Sophia," he said, but it sounded like a question. "I don't know where I belong anymore," she admitted. They stood close, the silence of the cabin wrapping around them. Wyatt raised a hand, his rough fingers brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. His touch was electric. Sophia's breath hitched. She leaned in slightly, drawn to his warmth. Wyatt leaned down, his eyes searching hers. For a moment, the world shrank to the space between them. The almost kiss hung in the air, heavy with promise. Then, the loud rumble of a diesel engine shattered the night. Wyatt pulled back sharply, the spell broken. He looked out the window. "The plow," he said, his voice flat. "Road crew is clearing the pass." Sophia felt a cold ache in her chest that had nothing to do with the weather. The rescue was over. Reality was returning. The next morning was a flurry of activity that felt entirely wrong. The sun was blindingly bright, melting the icicles on the eaves. The county plow had cleared the main drive, and a tow truck had arrived to pull Sophia's rental out of the ditch. Wyatt was back to being the stoic rancher. He helped the driver hook up her car. He checked her engine. He was efficient, polite, and distant. Sophia stood by the car, dressed in her wrinkled city clothes, feeling like an imposter again. She wanted to grab him, to shake him, to go back to the moment by the window. But the walls were back up. "Car runs fine," Wyatt said, slamming the hood. "You can make Jackson by noon." "Wyatt," Sophia started, "I want to thank you for saving my life. For everything." He'd tipped his hat, shielding his eyes. "Just doing what anyone would do, ma'am. Drive slow. Patches of ice in the shadows. Ma'am." The word felt like a slap. He was pushing her away. Hughes. Telling her she was a stranger again. "Right," Sophia said, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Well, goodbye, Wyatt." "Goodbye, Sophia." She got into the car. The leather seat felt cold. She started the engine and drove down the long, cleared driveway. She looked in the rearview mirror. Wyatt was standing by the gate, watching her go. He didn't wave. He just stood there, a solitary figure against the vast white backdrop of the mountains. Sophia turned onto the main road and didn't look back again, because she knew if she did, she might turn the car around. Chicago was loud. It was a sensory assault. The traffic, the sirens, the constant hum of humanity. 3 weeks had passed since the blizzard. Sophia had made the presentation. She had won the promotion. She was now a senior partner. She had the corner office with the view of the lake. She was miserable. She sat in a boardroom surrounded by men in expensive suits, discussing the wind load of a proposed 70-story tower in Dubai. They were talking about aesthetics, about dominance, about cost per square foot. Sophia looked at the blueprints on the table. Lines, angles, artificial air. All she could smell was cedar smoke. All she could hear was the wind howling around the cabin. All she could feel was the ghost of Wyatt's hand on her face. Sophia, the CEO, was looking at her. Your thoughts on the structural integrity of the atrium? Sophia stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. The room went silent. It's too much, she said. Excuse me. It's too much glass, she said, her voice gaining strength. It has no soul. It's just ... a cage. Shell looked around the room. These people were her friends, her colleagues, but they looked like aliens. They didn't know what it was like to rely on a neighbor for survival. They didn't know the peace of a mountain silence. I can't do this, she said. Sophia, are you feeling all right? No, she smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it felt genuine. I'm not, but I know the cure. She walked out of the boardroom. She walked into her office, picked up her purse, and left her laptop, her phone, and her blueprints on the desk. She took the elevator down, walked out into the gray Chicago slush, and hailed a cab. O'Hare Airport, she said. One way, fee. The drive up the mountain was different this time. It was late spring. The snow was gone, replaced by a carpet of wildflowers, yellow balsam root, and purple lupin. The air was crisp and smelled of wet earth and pine. Sophia drove her own car this time, a sturdy SUV she had bought at the dealership in Denver. She knew the way. She didn't need a GPS. She turned onto the dirt road marked with the weather-beaten sign, Double Bar X Ranch. Her heart was hammering in her chest harder than it had during the blizzard. What if he didn't want her? What if the moment had passed? What if he was just a man who saved a stranger, and she was a fool for reading love into survival? She crested the hill and saw the cabin. Smoke was curling lazily from the chimney. And there, in the corral, was Wyatt. He was breaking a colt. He was moving in a circle, holding a lead rope, talking low and soft to the nervous animal. He wore a t-shirt and jeans, his arms tanned and strong. Sophia parked the car and got out. The sound of the door closing made the colt pin its ears. Wyatt turned. He froze. The lead rope went slack in his hand. Sophia stood by the fence, her hands gripping the wood. I heard you needed a ranch hand, she called out, her voice trembling slightly. Ideally one who can't cook but is willing to learn. Wyatt stared at her. For a long, agonizing second, he didn't move. Then, he tied the rope to the post and walked toward the fence. He didn't walk with his usual slow swagger. He walked fast. He reached the gate and threw it open. He stopped inches from her. His eyes scanned her face, as if checking she was real, not a hallucination brought on by loneliness. You came back? He rasped. Oh, try to. Stay away, Sophia said, tears filling her eyes. Oh, I got the promotion. I got the office. But I couldn't hear myself think. All I could hear was your voice. Wyatt let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a month. He reached out and cupped her face with both hands. His palms were rough, calloused, and the warmest thing she had ever felt. I thought I dreamed you, he said. I thought the city took you back for good. The city doesn't have my heart, Wyatt, she whispered. You do. He didn't wait any longer. He kissed her. It was a kiss of relief, of hunger, of a promise finally kept. It tasted of the wild, of freedom, and of home. Sophia wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. The wind blew through the valley, rustling the aspen leaves, singing a song not of danger, but of welcome. "I'm staying," she murmured against his lips. "If you'll have me." Wyatt pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, a grin breaking across his face, a smile she had never seen before, bright and unguarded. "Sophia," he said, pulling her toward the cabin, toward the fire that never went out. "I was hoping you'd say that. Because I wasn't planning on letting you leave a second time." They walked toward the house together, hand in hand, as the sun dipped behind the Wind River peaks, casting the world in gold. The blueprint was thrown away. They didn't need lines or angles. They just needed this land, this moment, and each other. Forever.